Hello! Today we're going to visit the GMB trade union. Also joining me today are the ducking historians. Well, we'll see you there. Obviously, this being an office where people come to deal with their workplace issues, I didn't film the office itself. I just took photographs so that I didn't accidentally record anyone's confidential discussions. So here are some photographs. Thank you for letting me interview you today. So if you wouldn't mind just briefly introducing yourselves for the audience at home.
Rebecca Mitchell, I'm regional organiser for the GMB, worked directly for the GMB for the last 10 years. My background before that was working in residential and nursing care.
And I'm Stuart Richards. I'm a senior organiser for GMB Union. I look after public services in the Midlands and I manage the Tamworth office.
Oh, thank you very much. And thanks you for coming back to the show, Ian.
No problem.
So, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of person do you feel is best suited for a trade union?
Do you want to do?
No, go on. I might cut in if I need to. Go on.
So, anyone who has a job is the best person for a trade union. Our whole history is based on ordinary working people just coming together and seeing if they can improve their working conditions, their pay, and actually look at other things in terms of education, etc. So anyone who has a job is someone who should be in a trade union as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
So there isn't really a sort of personality type, because some people feel like I'm not really sure I'd be okay with a trade union because I'm a bit more of an individual kind of person. I'm not really a natural collective. If that makes any sense.
It does make sense. So if you just look at the way that our economy is structured in terms of balance of power. So when you start a job, your employer gives you a contract that you don't really have a say in. You're told that's your contract, that's what you have to do. You're told what your pay is. You have a set of laws that are around supporting that employer in managing your employment and actually trying to end your employment at some point if they want to. So all a trade union does is a way of redressing that balance. It's about democratising the workplace. So giving people a say in what happens during their working life. And again, that's really good for an individual, it's really good for someone who's part of a collective. Anyone has the ability to be part of a trade union, which is one of the few employment rights we've got that still stand in the country. So it's just about making sure that you have a stronger voice at work, and that's kind of for everyone, I think.
Yeah, I'd just say as well, if you're an individual person, you're someone that tends to be outspoken, feels that they have to stand up in the workplace when there's injustice, being in the trade union is going to protect you. So if your manager doesn't like the things when you speak the truth and you're telling them that things are not fair and not just, and they try and take you through a process, if you're in the trade union movement, you'll have a rep to protect you through that whole process, whether that's raising a grievance or going through any kind of process. So it's always good whether you want to be part of the collective or you just you're a person that beats to your own drum, always being in the movement.
Thank you. So I was thinking more about the kind of work that the union does. So, because people often think of trade unions, they think of picket lines, strikes, those scenes like in the movie Billy Elliot with people yelling scabs and throwing bricks whenever people are trying to go to work. Yeah. So what kind of things does a trade union do on a regular basis?
If you take the kind of really basic principle of what a trade union is, at its most fundamental, a trade union is just people in their workplace standing together to try and improve their terms and conditions. We do a huge amount beyond that. We've built our structures to support people in doing that, and that's part of our role. So what we do is help those people in their workplace to see if they can actually try and get better. Sick pay, time off, weekend pay, all things we've done.
Safety conditions in the workplace.
Yeah, but also it's going into the kind of the wider things as well. So our bit of the trade union world has got a proud history about helping people develop, to educate, to find different ways to develop themselves, but also going into that political bit and again talking about that imbalance of power between people who go to work and people who run businesses. It's about us as a trade union establishing a political party, which we did, to try and get a louder voice for people in the workplace.
Also in the community as well, we do a lot of things within the community. We attend Pride, we attend Women's Chainmakers, we will march to protect our NHS. It's something that the Tory government just keep attacking, and we've got to fight to keep it. We should be very proud of our NHS. So the trade union movement is for the workplace, but it is wider than that as well.
So would it be fair to say that striking's perhaps more of a last resort rather than the regular everyday occurrence of a trade union?
So no one goes into... So my job, I solely look after manufacturing. My first thoughts when I go into pay talks is not we're going out on strike. It's we talk to our members, we ask them what their expectations are. They look at where we are currently, so at the moment RPI is around 14%. So that's where their expectations are going to be. Their bills are going up, their base rate for the Bank of England's going up. We know petrol was extreme last year where that was going. People are struggling right now. So having any pay rise that's below inflation is actually a pay cut, and that's what public services have been facing for absolute years. And I think at the moment strike is out there, but just because people have had enough, people are struggling, working people are using food banks, and that's not right. So strike is a last resort. No one wants to go on strike. We don't want to take people out on strike if we don't have to. But if they're going to just manipulate people and not pay them what they're worth, then it is a last resort. We've got our key workers. Let's talk about the nurses that are currently out at the moment. We don't look after the nurses at the GMB, but we stand in solidarity with them. They're out. They worked all the way through COVID. They risked their lives. A lot of them stayed away from home and lived in hotels to protect themselves, to protect us as patients. We stood outside every week clapping for them to tell them what an amazing job they've got, but then we can't offer them a decent pay rise. What's that? Well, you can't pay your mortgage with claps. So yeah, sometimes it's a last resort, but sometimes it's necessary.
Rebecca said it much better than I could do it. We do look after bits of the NHS, so we've got a lot of members who work in the ambulance service who are currently on strike. That's the first national strike in over 30 years. And they've had 12 years where their pay each year has fallen below inflation. So it's taken 12 years before they got to the point where they thought this is enough. So it really is a last resort, but it's one that we never shy away from.
Okay, this question might be a little bit more delicate, let's just say, but it's also glad that, unless I'm making sorry to make assumptions here, but there's a woman with us here, because the Mullihan report in 2020 said that there was systemic sexism in the GMB. I'm sorry to bring it up, I'd just like to ask the question, how do you feel that things have progressed, from 2020 to 2023 for women in the GMB?
It was really welcome that the GMB put that report, asked for that report to be put together and didn't shy away from any accusations. And I don't think it's systemic just in the GMB. I think it's in other parts of the movement, in other parts of companies. It's been a male-dominated world for a very long time. The GMB have made movements to change that. We've had the first regional secretary for Wales and South West, who's not only a woman but is actually part of the LGBT community. So it's absolutely a fantastic movement from the GMB. From there, we've had another 2 women that have come up into the senior management team for Scotland and our North East region. So I think we are making strides to make changes, and it's really welcome to see that Gary's doing that. Our own regional secretaries, my line manager is a man. I have nothing but absolute support from him, and I believe he's an ally to the cause. So I think we're going in the right direction, and I think the Monaghan report was needed, and it's helped to make those changes.
And I think a real test of an organisation is what happens when things go wrong. And things went wrong within GMB. And one of the things I'm really proud of is what we did was actually publicly came out and said, actually, this is a problem, this is how we're going to do it and fix it. And they set out, the Monaghan report set out a series of recommendations to make sure we didn't end up in that situation and made progress going forward. And that's all very public, and thankfully we're getting to a point where we're starting to address some of those issues. I think like most organisations, we've still got a long way to go. I think the good bit for us is we're doing it very publicly, actually being open about the challenges and the progress we're making. We have still got a long way to go, but certainly within our region, we've got our management team is now over 50% women, which is a really good progress. We have one person who's part of the LGBT plus community in our management team as well. Thank you very much. So we're getting there, but we've still got a few ways to go.
Yeah, and it's not just being changed from the management. That we've got a task force that's been put together that's women from employed by the GMB and women that are members of the GMB. So the change is coming from us. We're being included in it. It's not just being decided by people at the top what needs to change. We're being asked, and we're helping to implement it.
I mean, and if you don't mind me asking a slightly more general question, because I've noticed a lot of pride posters around the office, and something that I've found out from people is that trade unions and working labour organisations, sometimes they get a bit scary for marginalised communities, feeling like, is it, because you've probably got the image of the old working men's club attitude of casual misogyny, racism, homophobia and stuff. Do you feel that this is different in the modern trade union?
I think one of the things that I'm hugely proud about the trade union movement is the work we've done with people who are part of the queer community. It's as a result of it's the National Union of Miners that effectively you can't think of a kind of more very male-dominated kind of industry, but it's that group of workers that have set about first at the TUC bringing motions in terms of LGBT plus equality that got into the Labour Party that then actually became law. It's because of the trade union movement that we've actually got some of the legislation we've got in place at the moment. And that was purely as a collaboration between the LGBT plus community working with trade unions. And now we're at the point where we are doing hugely brilliant work in terms of tackling inequality and tackling bigotry. GMB, for instance, we've just put together our trans toolkit, which is a mechanism for supporting workers who are part of the trans community in work, how they transition, how employers can support them. This is all really practical stuff, and actually I think it's the trade union movement that is pushing and creating much greater equality in workplaces. So that's something I'm really, really proud of. I think it's us that are doing it and our members who are part of that community. So again, it's really important to us that our structures and our work reflects all stratas of the workforce, and that means we need to be representative, and I think we're really doing good in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, as Stuart says, we've got toolkits that help employers that may not be as equality as aware, so we can help them into putting policies into the workplace that support not just the LGBT community, women going through menopause, and that's where I touched on that we do stuff in the community as well. So we get involved with Birmingham Pride, Tamworth Pride, all of them around the country where we can. The Women's Chainmakers events. We do show races and red card event. So we do as much as we can, and it's about changing the face of the union. We're not going to do it overnight. Our membership's just over 50% women, so we're making that change to be reflective within the structure of the GMB. And we know that there's work to do bringing more people through the GMB in the that are employed and through the rep structures that are people of colour, people in the community, people of different religions. So there's a lot of work to do, and I know Stuart and I, it's one of the things that's at the forefront of everything we do. So I'm an ally to the community, so I try and do everything I can to be there to support.
Nice. Speaking of community, because I wondered a bit about that, because people talk about being part of the community and what kind of feeling that you do. So, would you like to talk about how, say, how, say, the GMB is a part of, say, let's start with, like, the local community here in Tamworth?
Yeah, so our cleaner, Judith, she volunteered, well, she's part of her church community, and she volunteers for the Tamworth Food Bank. So we support the Tamworth Food Bank. We use our companies as well that we look after. So, for example, Britvic, my sister who's a member of the GMB, used to contract with Walkers, and they will help supply things around Christmas. So the one year we absolutely filled the food bank out. Rather than getting ourselves unnecessary Christmas cards, we put money towards the food bank every single year. We collect for homeless, so we try and do everything we can if we see that there's a charity and it's local. When we were trying to organise through COVID and to try and see our workers in Asda was very hard because the company didn't want to let us in to our usual visits that were in the canteen. So what we did was we did shopping visits. So we shopped and talked to our members at the same time, and all that shopping that we got at that time all went to the local food banks, not just for Tamworth. So the team that did it in Stoke would then contribute to the Stoke Food Bank. I used to be the equality officer for the region, so we had a women's group, BOSS, and that was the Birmingham Organised Sister Society, and they took on the charity called Julia House up in Stoke. And the first campaign that we ran up there was the White Ribbon campaign, and we were supported by Port Vale Football Club because during the World Cup, domestic violence goes up, I think it's about 25%. Now, we're not saying that it's only football fans that have issues there, but it is known to go up during that time. And so Port Vale supported us with raising money, and that money went to Julia House to help the families there with getting themselves back on their feet. JCB, I know, donated some laptops so that the women could help put themselves some CVs together and look for work. So anywhere we can, anyone can come and ask us to support, and we will do everything we can to support in any local area.
So part of our membership is effectively local people. So over the road, people who work in Asda are going to be GMB members. Wilco are going to be GMB members. The schools, Robert Peel, the hospital at the back, those are all people who are part of GMB, and it's really important to us that we've got a local identity to reinforce that. So again, it's like Rebecca says, where we can, we try and engage in community events. And again, we're sponsors of Tamworth Pride. Hopefully we will again this year. We the local Labour Party uses our offices. Again, it's trying to find practical ways that we can reinforce the link with not only our members who live locally, but the community as well.
And perhaps a bit more wider, if you don't mind me asking, but some of the things people tell me, it's stuff like, I like trade, I could sort of see this trade union, they seem nice and stuff, but I'm not a Marxist-Leninist. I'm not really sure if it's for me. Do you feel like you have to be some kind of like far left ideologue to be in a trade union?
There was this is not an advert for trade unionism, but there was a member of Parliament from Stoke North at the moment, a guy called Jonathan Gullis, who is, from my own personal opinion, an obnoxious right-wing Tory person who is one of the most bigoted people I've come across, who used to be part of a trade union and was a rep for a teachers' union. Norman Tebbit, one of the kind of stalwarts of the old Conservative Party, was also a trade union rep. There are lots of myths in terms of certainly how the media portrays trade unions. Trade unions are just reflections of their members. So we have many different viewpoints of our members. We have very many different communities, and we reflect that. The whole point of a trade union, this is just about working people doing whatever they can to try and improve their conditions. And politics, in terms of that, doesn't necessarily reflect one way or the other. The only bit that I would say is that by the fact of a huge imbalance in the power in our society, huge imbalance between employers, shareholders, and those people who actually have to work for a living, means that most of our policies are considered left-wing, but that's purely because we're setting out to try and redress that balance and make sure that working people have a much bigger say in our society. I'm not sure anyone should really disagree with that, and again, if it's left-wing, I'll accept that, but effectively you don't have to be one way or another to join a trade union.
Yeah. It's not a question on our application form.
It really isn't, yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Do you want me to pause because someone's at the door?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So, if you don't mind me asking, one of the things I heard once about trade unions is that their ultimate aim is to bring all workplaces into the state, or the public sector as you were. Do you feel that that is really what the objective of trade unions are?
I think the easy bit for us is that trade unions in that sense don't have a specific objective. The objectives are set by our members. So our members every year decide what the policies of the union are going to be, and they vote on that and they decide what it is, so it's not down to us. The only bits that we've got set out in policy at the moment is that we've got a fundamental belief that public services are much better run within the public sector. All we see when public services are put out or privatised into the private sector is we end up with services that are less effective and somebody makes a profit off it, which just seemed completely bargained. So there's no fundamental move to bring all manufacturing into the public sector. That's a step too far for us.
Yeah, I agree.
And a bit more about this sort of public-private sector. If you don't mind me asking, do you just because some people seem to think that trade unions just harass honest businesses who are just trying to make a bit of profit, and that think the public sector is kind of perfect. How do you feel about the idea of a trade union doing sort of public? Do you have to deal with the public sector as well, and how do you feel about the existence of private businesses?
So my background is public services. I used to work in a school, and I still got responsibility for public services, but just over half of our union deals with commercial services manufacturing, essentially the private sector, which is what Rebecca does mostly. The distinction for us is less of an issue. This is purely about what can we do to support the members and get a decent deal for us. And part of our interest in that is making sure that businesses are successful. There's no point, it's much more challenging for our members working in a failing business, because it means that they've got so little opportunity to actually get better pay, better terms, because there's no money in that. So we are there to support business as much as we can, but just not at the expense of individual members. So the big example for us at the moment is probably someone like Amazon. So Amazon, which is a kind of huge multinational global company that makes billions and literally billions. And what we want to do is support the workers in there to make sure that they don't end up getting injured just because they've gone to work. They don't end up having to go to a food bank because they're not paid enough. What we say in those kind of situations is, brilliant, this is a really successful business. That success should be shared with its workforce, the people who actually got those profits for the people. So we want successful businesses. We also want that success to be shared with our members.
Absolutely. I mean, Jeff Bezos has only got his money off the back of these working people. Another group of people who again worked through COVID, worked through very unsafe conditions. Our members are having to work 60+ hour weeks to make ends meet. They rely on that overtime, because if they don't have that overtime and just have their normal contracted hours, they can't survive. We're talking about a lot of migrant workers that are just being exploited. That man has a rocket that he sends into space for fun. He has a boat. He was the first trillionaire. He can afford to pay above the real living wage, he can afford to pay £15 an hour to these workers.
Speaking of the real living wage, well, I've noticed one of the criticisms some people come up with is that, yeah, you say you want to pay us this living wage and then it jumps and then it jumps again. It seems to always be going up, this apparent real living wage. Some people will want to know, is this living wage a manufactured thing?
So there are two real living wages in the country at the moment. There's one that's put together by an independent think tank that looks at the actual cost of living, so that takes into account rent, mortgages, petrol, fuel, food, and that comes out with a figure. And then there's the government's figure that they cobble together that is considerably less than that. Let's be honest, our real point here is that this shouldn't be an argument about the living wage. If you are going to work, you should be able to do more than live. What we want for people is actually a thriving wage, a wage that goes above poverty levels. It means, not only can you afford to feed your family, not only can you afford to exist and heat your home, but actually that you can start to enjoy your life a little bit more. It isn't manufactured. Both of those measures are based on real cost of living, but actually we should be expecting more than that. We should be aiming for more than that.
I think there are some people out there that have to rely on benefits that top up those wages. Well, clearly, if they're having to rely on government top-ups for their wages, then the real living wage isn't enough, is it? The more and more food banks opening all the time, working people going to those food banks, that's not right. The wages need to keep, it needs to keep going up to stay in line with inflation, so people are living a quality life and not just surviving.
And this one's probably going to be a bit of an easier one, maybe, perhaps. Who can join a trade union?
Anyone. Anyone can work. So, the trade unions for working people. Predominantly that's, but we have self-employed people because we have benefits that are not just about challenging the management and going for pay rise. We have solicitors that people can make use of. Our members, when they retire, can stay in the trade union movement because, again, we are not just about doing things in the workplace, we do things in the community. And our retired members, we've got a big group of them that like to come together. And I think because of all the cuts of community centres and places where they used to be able to go, actually it's something they rely on that gets them out of the house, that keeps them involved. They've got a lot of knowledge that can help the younger members that are coming through the trade union movement. So anyone can join. Students that don't work can join. We don't discriminate. We embrace everybody that wants to come and be part of the trade union movement and part of our family.
Like Rebecca said. Yeah.
I wonder if I could join.
You can join.
Absolutely. Anyone can.
I mean, I'm self-employed.
Yeah.
So what we've seen over the last few years are the number of people who've joined who are self-employed has increased, and that's come from lots of different reasons. Some of it is because there are people who are self-employed that probably aren't really self-employed, so people who work for Uber, for instance, and Every, those are effectively classed as self-employed, but they have to deliver services. They aren't members of trade unions. We also have people who are standalone, so a lot of people in the promotions industry and people who work in creative industries tend to be members of trade unions just because it comes in handy if you ever need that additional support.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for your time, and hope you have a really nice day going forward, and thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was our visit to the GMB. Very nice, wasn't it, duckies? Yeah. Okay, thanks for letting us visit. And, well, I know that this might seem a bit of a political one, but it's also real. It's things that are happening right now. It's things that people have to live through and live with. So, Well, hope this has given you a broader insight into what a trade union's like. Talk to some real people, you know, because the headlines tell you all sorts of things, but it's nice to see a bit of what's going on behind the headlines. And whatever your politics and however you might feel about trade unions, now you've got to see some real people in a trade union. And thank you again to the GMB for letting me visit. Their link is in the description. And, well, it was lovely having you here.